Welcome back to the JavaScript Essential Training Series. I am Mike King, your host, and in this tutorial we'll be talking about comments and statements inside of JavaScript. So comments are an important aspect of any programming language, and JavaScript is no different. A comment is a line of code that your browser ignores as it's executing the rendering of the page, but it actually gives you an opportunity to put in notes into your code so you know what you were thinking or what you were planning to do when you're actually writing that aspect of the code. Comments are used to remind you and other programmers as to why an area is designed the way it is. And comments can also be used as reminders as you're developing an application. I sprinkle comments throughout my applications to remind me of things that I need to do as I'm working through that application to make certain I don't miss anything as I'm writing the code. Comments in JavaScript are entered by starting the statement out with 2 forward slashes. So let's move into our development environment and I'll demonstrate how we use comments inside of JavaScript. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drop out of my presentation and drop into my development environment. First thing I want to do, let me confirm that I've got my Apache server up and running, which I do. I'm going to go ahead and load Sublime Text 3, which will be my text editor I'll be using for this demonstration. And I'm going to bring up Google Chrome, which will be the browser I'll be using. I actually have my template loaded in Sublime Text 3. I'll go ahead and save that. Let me do a save as. I'm going to save that as comments.html inside my exercise file. I'm actually in section 1 of my JavaScript training. You should be in your HTT docs folder inside your Apache server if you're going to work through these exercises with me. Just go ahead and save that, your template document, as your comments.html. I'm going to go ahead and put a title in here, and I'm just going to call it comments. Actually, we're going to look at comments and statements in HTML, but I'm just going to call this comments. And inside my container, I'm going to go ahead and put an H3 and just say comments and statements in HTML, or in JavaScript. I don't know why I said HTML. Go ahead and save those changes. Let's go ahead and load that inside of our browser so we can make sure that we get the right file online, and we do. We got our title in there so we know we're working with the right file. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me go ahead and demonstrate how we do some comments inside of JavaScript. First thing, we already know, or we should know, that whenever we want to enter JavaScript, we have to have script tags. So that's the first thing. So even when we're demonstrating our comments, they need to be obviously in script tags so that the rendering engine or the browser can interpret the comments correctly. And all I would do is put my 2 forward slashes and I'd say comments go here. So I could type anything I wanted to inside this comment after those 2 forward slashes, and it would be a comment inside my code. If I wanted to run together a group of comments, I could actually have a forward slash, then I'd use my star symbol, and I could put this is a multi-line comment. And until I actually take that away, when I come down, I'm still in comments. And this can go on as long as I wanted until I actually close the comment out. And to close the comment out, I could actually do the same thing we did to start it. Only I'd put the star and the forward slash there. Now I'm back into my scripting mode. So we can have single line comments with the 2 forward slashes. I could have a forward slash star, then a multi-line comment, and end it with a star forward slash for multi-line comments. Rendering engines and browsers understand to ignore comments when they run across them in the execution of a web page. So when we're actually running our JavaScript code, it's going to ignore anything that we have that's a comment. So if I have a group of comments like I did in the example, it just ignores them. And you'll see that when we start looking at statements. So I'm going to go ahead and leave these comments here because I want to show you they are ignored. Computer programming simply follow instructions that are given in the sequence they are given. When we talk about statements, and I'm actually combining the comments and the statements tutorial for JavaScript because, I think you probably already have a grasp of what a statement is. It's important to understand how we use comments to comment our code, but it's also important to understand that statements inside JavaScript are instructions to our rendering engine or to our browser, to our computer, on how to execute this code. So these instructions are going to be followed step by step. Just like any other programming language, JavaScript follows instructions sequentially, step by step, as they are entered into the program. It's called sequential program flow. And these comments or these instructions are called statements in programming. Every statement in JavaScript and many other languages for that matter will end in a semicolon. So whenever we're working with statements in JavaScript, we're always going to end them in a semicolon. If you're familiar with PHP, it's the same way in PHP. Whenever we end a statement in PHP, we end it with a semicolon. This is a requirement for proper syntax in the programming language. If you remember from our first example, we actually used a JavaScript statement to check our configuration. We used the following. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this from my text file, but I'm going to bring it into my script lines. We use document.write. This is a test. If I save this, refresh my browser window, we can actually see that printout in the browser window. It's executing the document.write method inside JavaScript, which actually is a function, and it's printing that text out to our screen. This is an actual JavaScript statement, and notice that it ends with the semicolon. Very important aspect. We can have multiple statements together, and they'll be executed in the order the statements are processed. I'm going to go ahead and again go into my text file so you don't have to watch me type all this. And I'm going to put this in place, and I've got multiple comments now, multiple statements, not comments. Multiple statements, document.write, this is a test of JavaScript. Document.write, web development is an interesting job. And document.write, my best days are ahead of me. I'm going to save all those changes. And again, because this is a sequential program, it's going to follow all those statements as they're written. It's going to execute those as it comes across them in the program. By the way, I didn't need those blank lines between them. That was just for clarity's sake. I'm going to go ahead and save all these changes. This is a great time to pause if you want to type this in, because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to execute this code so you can see how it executes in our browser. Again, make sure everything's saved, refresh my browser window, and you notice we've got one long line. This is a test of JavaScript. First I have this is a test, which was the first thing that we did. Then I've got this is a test of JavaScript. Let me go ahead and shorten this window a little bit. Bring this one over. This is a test of JavaScript. Web development is an interesting job, and my best days are ahead of me. So it took all that text and executed each one of those lines as it ran across it in the statement in the execution of the program. Also notice that all the text runs together. Because we didn't tell it to break a line, the program does exactly as it's instructed. It just printed the lines out. No spaces, no breaks, no line feeds, no carriage returns. It just printed it out. It did exactly as we told it to do. Print the text. We did not tell it to do any returns or any line fees. We'll get into that later in the tutorials. Notice that each statement ends with a semicolon. Another important aspect. Every statement in JavaScript will end with that semicolon. Don't forget that. That's one of the biggest things that new programmers run into. They'll start running into syntax errors, and that's one of the biggest things that I see as I'm helping people figure out what's wrong with their code, is they forget simple things like semicolons, quotation marks, escape characters. I mean, it's always the little stuff that tends to bite us. So, you understand now how comments work. We can have single line comments inside of our JavaScript code. We can have multi-line comments inside of our JavaScript code. We use comments to mark up our code as to how or why we developed the code the way that we did, to remind us of things that the code is doing. And it may not seem important now, but if you come back to that code a year from now or 2 years from now or 6 months from now when you're working with your customer, it's nice to have notes in there to remind yourself as to why you wrote something the way you wrote it. It may be pointing to something that you're not obviously aware of. So it's always good to have notes inside your code. And you should also understand now that every line of code inside a JavaScript program is called a statement. They all must end with semicolons. And JavaScript, like all programming languages, enters statements or executes statements in the order in which they're entered in the code. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.